along those lines too, if you had said, this is my goal, and then I tried to achieve your goal instead of trying to work on my own goal, I would have not been successful. Knowing what your own goal is and then following the path toward your own goal and making it your own, not doing it for somebody else, but doing it for yourself is key.
Welcome to Grit Meets Growth, the podcast where we explore getting uncomfortable, making things happen, and creating a magnetic life. Now let's get after it.
What's this episode brought to us by?
This episode's brought to you by Orange Ball Creative. If you're having a hard time telling your story and connecting with your customers, creating engagement where they actually want to work with you or buy what you do, you should call Orange Ball so we can help you.
Where do we find you at?
OrangeBallCreative.com.
There you go.
I'm gonna leap off of that for a second as we kick off this episode. I want to hit on a topic that has come up a couple of times this week already, and it's just like the basic building blocks of communication. And I'm gonna go off on this for a second with the caveat that I am the pot calling the kettle black in some cases. So if you hear this and it's not something I live every day, I'm just going to acknowledge that right away. But one of the things that's come up is different kinds of communication are more effective than others. So we've gotten into a position, and I see this in work and business all the time. We've gotten into a position where it's way easier to send an email than to make a phone call. And what I've seen with that is, it is easier to send the email. And the email probably takes you 30 seconds. The phone call might take you a little bit longer. But here's what happens when you send the email. And this is what bothers me. And this is what I want to vent on for a second. When I send you an email, now it's up to you to figure out what the tone of the conversation was supposed to be. You're supposed to read into the email what my tone was, what my intent was. Am I calling something out, or was it a jab? What am I really trying to say? And what it creates is confusion. And then based on that confusion, we have to send 5 more emails back and forth just to clarify what I was saying the first time. If I had made a phone call in the beginning and just said, hey, here's what I'm trying to say. Can we have like a 2-minute conversation on this? We could solve the problem and move on to important things much faster. But that's not the way the world works. Like I said, I'm the pot calling the kettle black. I don't do this well all the time, but I'm working on it. I'm just curious what your feedback is on that, because I know it's something that lands on you and your business as well.
It does. And just as you said, it's so much easier and faster in solving or getting to the root or the next step or whatever by picking up the phone. The email gets convoluted so many different ways by all the people involved. And, so you get an email and now you're sitting here looking at it and going, how am I really supposed to respond to this? And in many cases for me, I just pick up the phone and call them. Hey, what'd you mean by this? Or, if I've got bad news to deliver, like say we were talking about a certain topic and we thought we were going to be able to help them solve that problem. But as we've had more dialogue, we've realized that their use cases are different and outside of what we offer. And so sometimes it's easier just to pick up the phone and say, you know what, I appreciate the opportunity to chat about this. Given the recent light of your use cases, it's not really a fit for us. And that's so much better delivered via voice, via the phone, in my opinion, than in an email.
It's just the personal touch.
For sure. But I've always been a better communicator verbally than I am in written anyway. So that is always been my go-to. I would rather pick up the phone, have the conversation about it, whatever the topic is, than sit here and email back and forth.
Are you a person who is afraid to dive into conflict in situations like that and have those tough conversations? I assume you're not, but.
Not at all, because I'm, when I have somebody on the phone, whatever their response is, I can ask the follow-up question right there. I can dig into it deeper. I can seek to understand where they're coming from versus assuming where they're coming from based on where I'm at in my current scenario when I read an email, right? I may have just came out of a meeting that I'm not really feeling too great about, and I read an email from somebody and it throws the context all out based on where I'm at, not necessarily where they're coming from with it, but where my interpretation of it is. And it's just bad, in my opinion. Pick up the phone, make the phone call, have the dialogue.
Like I said, it's one of those things that in the moment it seems easy. I can fire off an email and kick the can down the road is basically what you're doing. It may seem easy, but it's not effective. And I think there's a lot of areas in our lives. We talk about this a lot. There are areas in your life where you need to pick effective over easy. And 98% of the time, you're going to be glad you picked effective over easy because you're going to get the results you want. Picking up the phone gets you the results you want way faster than sending some crappy email.
And let's face it, it differentiates you today because everybody else just wants to send the email or the text. Now, text a little bit different, in my opinion. That's email. You don't know what's going on with that. Text, a lot of times you are almost having a back and forth conversation. Most people respond to text in much quicker fashion than they do an email. But even there, it's written word versus verbal. You still lose context.
Even to take that a step further, phone is awesome. Sitting face to face, you get body language, and that levels it up even more. The body language thing, to be able to sit across the table from somebody, see their reactions, see how they respond, have that back and forth in real time where you can visually be engaged. That's a game changer. So I get frustrated. I look at my kids, 2 16-year-olds. This is a skill that I am trying to drive into them every single day, learning how to engage on the phone verbally and face to face and get them dialed in on that, because it's hard. It's going to become a lost art. To your point, it already is kind of a lost art.
And the interesting thing is a lot of what we're talking about, John, goes back to what we discussed in episode 23 and talking about the recipe for a magnetic life. There's a number of those components, right? We basically had 7 pieces of that pie. Work out, do what you say you're going to do, stop caring about what others say, control how you react, invest in yourself, stop comparing yourself to others, and build your future. So where does this pick up the phone fit into that? As we're talking through this, part of it is that control how you react component. Take the ball and run with it and get the answers that you want to get to by picking up the phone. Friend sends you a text. Pick up the phone. There's been a few times where texting with friends and it goes back and forth a couple of times, and finally I just pick up the phone. I just dial them up. Sometimes they'll pick up and talk. Other times, they're in the middle of something else going on. And then the text back, I'll call you in 5. Stop being afraid of the phone, people.
You've done that with me a handful of times where we'll be going back and forth on a text and all of a sudden I'll see your name pop up on the phone, and it's basically screw it. Like, we could keep typing with our fingers or we could just have the conversation. And I'm always glad that we had the conversation.
Yeah. And part of that's just, again, back to me. It's easier for me to get my point across and understand your perspective when I do that.
I think it just shows a different level of respect too. I had a buddy of mine text me, this is probably 2 months ago, and he was going through some stuff, and he's like, hey, if you could just be thinking about me, pray for me. I've got this thing going on. I'm having a tough time with it. It would have been easy for me to just text him back and be like, hey, I got your back. But it was a lot more powerful to immediately call him back and say, hey, dude, Like, what's going on? How can I help? Where are you at? And it made a big impact on him that I did pick up the phone. It's memorable, like you said, because nobody does it anymore.
John, let me ask you this. How does that play into a growth mindset, our personal marketing strategy, our personal marketing plan?
You and I have had conversations about this. So that's the world I live in is marketing, right?
Yep.
So I have a lot of thoughts on clients and where they're at and what this looks like. Clients come to us and they say, hey, I want a strategy, I want a plan, and then I want to know how to execute on the plan, right? So strategy is basically, where are you today versus where do you want to go? Like, let's define what point A is, and let's define what your goal is. What's point B? And let's get really clear on that. Then you get into the marketing plan side, and it's, let's map out how we're going to get from point A to point B. You know, what tools are we going to use? What are we going to focus on through the process? That kind of thing. And then we get tactical. How we're literally driving the car from point A to point B, and hands on the steering wheel, feet on the gas, stopping for gas every once in a while to make it happen, right? So that's on the marketing side. But one of the things,
I'm going to stop you for a second. It doesn't matter whether that's marketing or whether that's information security or whether that's business. That's consulting. That's a consultative approach, because we do the same thing at Octillion. It's the exact same approach that we take with our clients.
So now,
different topics, right? But same execution.
Different topics, same execution. Now let's take it and apply it to life. And this is what hit for me this week, because I had like this light bulb moment. Life is the exact same thing. What's your strategy? Okay, let's define point A and point B again. Where are we at today? Where do we want to go? What are the goals? Let's come up with a plan. What's the plan? How are we going to get from point A to point B? What tools are we going to use? What are we going to focus on? And then get tactical on it. Let's drive the car. We know what our strategy is. We know what matters. We know what our plan is. We know the tools we have at our disposal to get where we want to go. Now do the work. It's the exact same thing. And it translates from business to personal so easy. I hadn't ever thought of it like that until this week, and started bouncing that around in my head. And I realized there's no rocket science to it. There are some clear steps that we use to get where we want to go.
It's a process that we can use in almost every facet of our life, whether it's business or personal, or apply that to any goal that you have. It's the same process we went through when we were getting ready to do 75 Hard. I was going into 75 Hard with a plan to succeed. I was not going to fail. And I put the plan in place to be able to execute upon that to achieve that goal. No different than when I take a motorcycle trip and we put a plan together of where we're going, what are we doing, what does that look like, where are potential stops, what's a potential route, what's an alternate route if something should happen and we need to change, and then we execute upon it.
So here's something we see in the marketing world all the time, and I guarantee you've probably seen it in security as well. It can be really easy to skip strategy and skip plan and jump right to tactical. We're just going to start doing stuff. We're going to start taking massive action without having a strategy or a plan in place. You can do that, but you're not going to get where you want to go. You have to put the effort in to creating the strategy. You have to put the effort into creating a plan before you just dive in and start doing stuff. It just doesn't work.
It's a level set and an understanding that needs to happen in that strategy phase, right? Not only where do you want to go, but what does that look like when you get there? Starting to paint that picture of what is the end goal. Because it's going to be different for every organization. It's going to be different for each one of us. What my end goal is, even through 75 Hard, was different than what your end goal was. Even though we took the same activities and the same things to get there, I always kept my ultimate goal and what I wanted that to look like in the end in mind. It's the same thing when we apply that across any other opportunity.
Along those lines too, if you had said, this is my goal, and then I tried to achieve your goal instead of trying to work on my own goal, I would have not been successful. Knowing what your own goal is and then following the path toward your own goal and making it your own, not doing it for somebody else, but doing it for yourself is key. That's one of the things that we see in businesses all the time as we're working with clients is you need to have alignment within your organization as to what the business goals are. And everybody has to be on board with that. You can call it rowing the boat all the same way. I mean, there's a million analogies for what that looks like, but you all have to be working together and heading in the same direction to get where you want to go. Too often, the organization doesn't sell the goal hard enough or well enough, I should say, to all the people who are going to work on it. And then they're fractured and they're all trying to go their own direction. Alignment is key. Personally, you don't have to have alignment. You only have to be aligned with yourself. You get into a business situation, a marketing situation, an IT security situation. Now we have to get everybody on board working on the same direction, same path, same goal to really create any kind of momentum.
That's where the dialogue becomes so critical. That's where we really get to what is our common goal together. And there are, just like in our personal lives, there are going to be detractors. There are going to be people in those conversations that are trying to distract you from what you want to accomplish, or they are only wanting to accomplish what they need to accomplish in their lives. And that takes a little bit of tact in a business world in order to cut through that BS and ultimately get to those answers. In our personal lives, it's a little bit easier just to stop caring about what somebody says, because I'm only focused on my goals. But in the business world, we have to take a little bit of tact, and we have to have that dialogue. We have to have that conversation. We have to level set with people. We have to talk about that strategy component before we can execute.
I'm going to spin on something you just said. We have to figure out how not to care what other people think. And I agree with that 100%. We also, from time to time, have to figure out how not to care what we think about ourselves. And I've battled this over the last couple of years. Even I would say starting the podcast was a big example of that. In my head, I had these moments where I'm like, why would anybody care what you have to say? Like there's this little devil on the shoulder kind of thing, this little inner voice that's saying, hey, you don't belong here. You haven't earned the right to do this. You don't have anything valuable to say. Sometimes we need to shut down our own voice too and learn to trust ourselves outside of some of those paradigms that we bring into life, those past experiences that we've had that weren't very good, those failures that we've had that we let define ourselves. Sometimes we got to battle back against those. As much as we have to battle back against other people's voices, there are a lot of moments where we need to battle back against ourselves and our own voice just the same.
You can't battle against those others if you can't battle with yourself. You have to know in your heart of hearts. Like you have to go through that strategy conversation with yourself, John. Because if you can't figure it out for yourself, if you can't love yourself, so to speak, you can't love others. None of that matters if we can't get our own head straight. So yeah, you're right. We've got to battle with ourselves on a daily basis.
Love yourself used to sound like fluffy BS to me. And I have learned that it's far from that. The loving yourself at its core is essential. You've got to get to a point where when you look in the mirror, you're like, okay, I'm proud of who I'm looking at. And that means, sometimes that means making some changes. It means making some tweaks. It means setting some things aside that you've carried around with you for a long time and transforming who you are when you look in the mirror. But getting to that point where you're happy and you can say, I love the person on the other side, there's a lot of value in that.
Dude, it opens up everything else. We are so living in a world that everybody wants to change things. Many of those things that people want to change on a daily basis are out of our control. I can't change the fact that gas prices are high. I can't change the fact that food prices are high. I can, however, plant a garden in that scenario. I can work on myself. I can better myself. If I better myself by working out, by doing what I say I'm going to do, right? By following this recipe for building a magnetic life, I can better myself, which means I can be better to the outside world. I can be better to my family. I can be better to my friends. I can't do that if I can't take care of myself. How can I take care of anybody else? Do the damn work, man. Put it in. Put in the work. Work on yourself. It's what we've been doing. It's what we've been talking about for the last year. And you and I, separately and together, have achieved some pretty awesome things over the last year. Those things that I've accomplished have made me a better friend, have made me a better father, have made me a better spouse. I truly believe it. I couldn't accomplish that if I didn't put in the work to better myself first.
There's been a lot of ugly moments on the road though too. There's been a lot of moments like bettering yourself. When you say put in the work, it's hard work. And sometimes it gets ugly, and sometimes it gets muddy and dirty, and sometimes it gets bloody.
And it gets lonely. All of that.
Yes. Yes. It is not easy. It is not easy, but it's worth it. Stepping back for a second too, that whole topic of you need to be able to love yourself. It's not love yourself once you're perfect. Unfortunately, you're never going to land there. You're never going to get to a point where you love the perfect self, because it's never going to exist. You're always going to have something when you look in the mirror that you're like, that's not perfect, or I wish this was a little different. You got to love yourself during the process. You got to love the progress that you're making. You got to love the work, but don't get stuck on, I'm going to love it when it's perfect. I'm going to love me when I'm perfect, because it's not going to work. You're never going to arrive. You're never going to get there. You got to figure out how to love yourself in the mess and in the junk and in the hard work and the blood and the sweat and the tears and the mud and the crap. That's where you got to learn how to love yourself first.
Perfect doesn't exist. Not in our world anyway. There's always work to do. There's always things to improve. If you're seeking that constant improvement, you're moving in the right direction.
There's a really good book on that called The Gap and the Gain. And it just to paraphrase it a little bit, we spend a lot of time focused on the gap, on the space between how far we've gotten and where we're going. We get really focused on we haven't gotten there yet. We haven't arrived, right? The idea behind the gap and the gain is we should focus more on the gain. We should focus more on how far we've come, how much we've grown, on what we've achieved along the way. Focus on that. Keep working toward your goal 100%. Be able to see the gap for what it is. Like, I've got some work to do. I've got some progress I can make, but look how far I've come. And that's changed the conversation for me, because up until maybe 6 months ago, I've focused a lot on the gap. Haven't gotten here yet, haven't arrived yet, haven't achieved this goal quite yet. Just not there yet. And that book reframed things for me a little bit to be able to say, okay, I'm proud of myself. I've accomplished this. These 3 things, I've knocked down these 3 barriers that were in front of me. I'm making progress, and I'm damn proud of that. That's been a game changer for me. And it's changed the way I look at my own journey in a really positive way.
How's that impacted your conversations around strategy with prospects and clients?
I think it gives a realistic assessment. When you start having a conversation about strategy, let's define point A, where we're at, and point B, where we're going, it creates a moment in the beginning of that conversation to be able to say, okay, getting point A was not the starting point. Point A is where you're at today. So if you go all the way back to the starting point when you launched your business, or you go back a year compared to where you are today, let's give point A the props it deserves and say, okay, we've made some progress. Because a lot of times, I heard this morning from a client, God, we just haven't done what we should have done. We haven't put the effort into marketing. We haven't focused on marketing the way we should. We just haven't done it. We just haven't done the work. And they were right. They have significant gaps in their marketing that we're going to be able to help them fill. But the reality of it is that's a focus on the gap 100%. They have a gap in their marketing. They've also, if you really want to look at it, up until today, have made some significant gains that got them to a point where they can address the gap and say, okay, this is one of the spots where we have room to grow. So that was part of the conversation we had with them was, look at how far you've come. Look at what you've built up until now. Now let's help you take it and move forward with that and fill those gaps. I'm sure you see the same thing in your business.
For sure. And I see the same thing in my personal life as well. We just need to embrace the forward progress, right? The forward momentum, and know that we're moving in the right direction. We might not be as far down the road as we want to be, but we have moved down the road, and we need to make sure that we're recognizing that we're embracing that we're giving ourselves credit for that while looking on what the next step is. You have to give yourself some credit for the work that you've put in already. That's all part of that self-love. Give yourself some love for the things that you've accomplished in your day, in your week, in your month, in your year, in your progress towards your goal.
I would say even extend that love to the people around you. You hit a home run last week when you were talking about your daughter and how proud you were of her. And so we're recording this 3 days before Father's Day, which hits home a little bit as well. But just the way you talked about her and how proud you were of her and the work she's put in and the human being that she's becoming as a dad, to be able to look at her and hear that in your voice when you were talking about it really impacted me. And it hit home that when we see people in our circle, whether it's our family or our businesses or whatever that looks like, when we see people in our circle who are making progress, who are growing, who are doing the work, and including ourselves in this conversation as well, we need to make time to celebrate progress. We need to make time to celebrate the gains, because way too often we're so busy with everything that we've got going on that we don't take time or make time to celebrate. And it's a huge miss. When there are good things in your life that you have to be grateful for, where there are gains that you've made personally, or people within your circle that you care about and you love have made gains, you need to stop. And I'm talking stop dead in your tracks and let them know. Make that phone call to say, you know what, I'm really proud of you. Really proud. I see what you're doing. You're doing a great job. Or make it a dinner. Let's have dinner together. Let's break bread together and celebrate this win.
Or something as simple as a high five.
Absolutely. We did it at the gym in the Murph. We high-fived. It's super simple, but it's like, hey, I see you. I see you showing up. I see you doing the work. I see the sweat. Nice freaking job. We don't hear that enough. We hear a lot about when we fail. We hear a lot about when we miss the mark. We hear a lot about where we have this gap. We don't ever let people know when they are doing a good job. And I think that is such a big miss. We need to celebrate more and make room for that. That's part of the reason everyone's so freaking negative. They're not celebrating. They're so stuck in gas prices and food prices in the economy. To your point, you can't do anything about it. Show up in your circle, in your work, in your family. Show up in the spaces where you have some influence. Make your mark there and quit worrying about all the external crap.
The external crap right now that really drives me nuts. People talk about the weather. Oh, it's so hot. Oh, it was just so hot the other day. I'm like, we sit all winter long here in Minnesota, freezing our you-know-what off. And when it finally gets hot, we want to complain about that too? Like, don't we wait all winter long for this weather? Yeah, it's hot when it's 100 degrees. There's no doubt about it. It's miserable. But it ain't 100 degrees all day long. Make your adjustments. Enjoy it. Embrace it. Celebrate. Can't do anything to change it. Figure out how to work within the parameters, man.
Get up early. Get up early on that 100-degree day, because we're coming into a few of those. We had one earlier this week. Yeah, it's hot. Your option is stay in the house, hunker down, and don't do anything, or find a time of day where you feel comfortable and you can get outside for a little bit. If that's 6 o'clock in the morning, get out of bed, get outside for a little bit, enjoy a little bit of breeze on your face, then go in the house. But you got to work within the parameters. You're spot on, man.
I'm going to tell you, man, I got a 600 plus mile road trip on the motorcycle coming up the end of the month. It's going to be warm, I'm sure. Looking at the 10-day forecast, it's going to be warm. We leave bright and early, man. Sometimes 3:30, 4:30 in the morning. Get those cool miles under the belt before that midday sun hits.
What do you do when the midday sun hits?
Stop more often. You got to be cognizant of your hydration, how you're feeling. It's easy sometimes to just want to push through it, and there are times to do that. But sometimes you just gotta stop and grab some shade.
So you have a plan for the heat.
Yeah. Dude, every plan has a plan of a plan for a plan that may not quite go as planned. Don't ask me to repeat that because I don't know if I can.
There's a point in there, though. You have to have some flexibility in the plan for the unexpected, because the unexpected happens every single day. I probably in the last year, I can count on one hand the number of days that went exactly as I expected. It just doesn't happen. Lots of stuff comes up. Lots of things come up personally, professionally, whatever that looks like. That's a good point about the plan. Have your plan, but have some flexibility built in for when things go off the rails, when they go unplanned.
Yep. Sometimes you just need to find some air conditioning.
You can't grip the plan too tight, because if you grip it too tight, you squish it, and you miss opportunities to make those little pivots and adjustments that are going to make you more comfortable, get you some shade.
Yeah, and it just is miserable.
Yeah.
And that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is not to be miserable. The purpose of it is to have some fun. And yes, 600 miles in one day plus on a motorcycle is fun.
I don't doubt that for a bit. It sounds fun. That goes back to that point, though. It's reacting well to life.
Mm-hmm.
How do you react? How do you react when things get hot? How do you react when there's a failure? How do you react when something gets uncomfortable or an uncomfortable conversation has to be had? How do you react when something good happens? Do you celebrate it? How do you react? You move out of this episode, that's one thing to think about. How do you react? How do you react to life when life happens to you, good or bad? How do you show up? Because that's the part you can control, is how you react.
Yep. Put some of your meditation time into that over the next 2 weeks, and think about how you react to situations and how you could react differently, and make it a great one.
Right on, man. Always good.
See y'all soon.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of Grit Meets Growth. We have 2 asks for you as we wrap things up today. First of all, if you enjoyed this podcast or you got something out of it today, we'd love to have you subscribe and follow us so that you can get your ear in on more of these conversations. And the second thing we'd love to have you do is if you heard something today that you think could help somebody else or that they need to hear, we just ask you to share the podcast and let this message be magnetic to as many people as possible. So with that, have an awesome day. Make it happen. Get out there, do the work, and let's get after it.